again, welcome. And now we would like to give you an overview over the project before we will go into detail, both with regard to research questions which are specific for different work packages and also with regard to methodology. It's just a first glance at the project, what we want to do, what our aim is, and so on. The title of the project is Socio-spatial Transformations in German-Polish Interstices, Practices of Debordering and Rebordering. We are luckily funded by the German Research Foundation and also the Polish National Research Agency in the framework of the Beethoven program. And we are these both partners, as we have it already indicated before in our first talks today. What is our aim? The aims are to look at the socio-spatial transformations, to describe them, particularly in Polish-German border regions. And we would like to reconstruct the socio-spatial transformations in the time span since the opening of the border in 2007 until today. These are our regions under investigation. We differentiate three different axes, if you want so. We looked on a wider field between Berlin and Poznan. And there you can see that we have marked a bit the regions, Berlin and Poznan. And there are connections and cross-border practices between it. This is the first thing that we look at. It's the urban spatial axis between Berlin and Poznan. Then we have a closer look in the closer borderland region of Frankfurt-Oder and Słubice, also an urban context. And last but not least, below in the south, you can see that we also took rural areas into consideration in order not to highlight only the very urban border crossing practices and knowledge. So, and to be more concrete, we look at Gießen on the German side and Poznan on the Polish side. What were our assumptions? On the one hand, we assumed that there is a wide practice of debordering due to the fact that the barriers have been removed, that the frontier is not anymore physically presented, at least not hardcore presented, and that this facilitated the practices of crossing borders on both sides, and that also collaboration between the different actors on both sides can be facilitated by this phenomenon. We assumed that the cross-border practices are very, very common, that we can see this in a widely practiced way, and that due to this fact, people are very familiar with the respective other side of the border. We also assume that the borderline gets blurred, that it's not clear anymore where it is exactly or where it was, and that there are some uncertainties with regard of the borderlines. And we also expected that interstices might emerge in the borderland region. I mean, that the borderland region becomes an interstice in the most elaborated form, or at least that there are some places which are representatives for new spaces that emerge in these borderlands, which are a bit apart from the national distinctions. So these were our first rough assumptions on the one hand. On the other hand, we were also aware that there might be a rebordering at the same time, in terms of erecting fences where they were not before, new fences, erecting new fences and building up or enforcing security systems in the region. And this could be, that was our assumption, this could be a reaction to the debordering, which comes up with uncertainties for some of the people who experience this. And of course, we are also aware of the fact that the different cultural spaces still continue to exist. So there are of course still two different nations and cultures. So this was our background, the assumptions, roughly spoken. And against that background, we elaborated a comprehensive research question which asked which are socio-spatial transformation processes, how can they be observed, what can be observed in the investigated regions, and to be more specific, we wanted to look at the social and material constructions of the border and how it was changed. And in this respect, we wanted to focus on debordering, rebordering, and the interstices, and to see if we find empirical evidences for it and how they can be described and systematized. This means that we had quite different research foci, to be more concrete, exactly 4 research foci: the local discourses, where the borderlands are discussed on each of the sides, the materiality of the borders, like with physical barriers that are not there anymore, or the old posts of the border, of the crossing border place, and so on. We wanted to know which knowledge and practices of the border and the borderland can be observed both in the area of local people who are very much engaged in collaboration on the German and Polish level, but also with respect to the very everyday people, the residents in the regions who live there and use this wider area of the borderland. We have planned to work in 5 work packages. The first one was a much more explorative work package, where we started to get more empirical evidence and to see in how far our project has to be a bit amended or changed due to the empirical things that come up, and in order to construct our methodological tools. We had then 1 work package on public discourses, 1 on the knowledge and practices of local experts, 1 of the residents, and there is another work package which is the comparative one. When we come later on to these work packages, this will be done mostly tomorrow. 1 of them will be presented today. It's work package 0. This will be presented still today, right after this talk. Then you will see that we will go into depth to the different research questions there, once again, which are more specific, and also to the methodologies. And I also have to tell or to warn you, if you want so, that not all of the working packages are on the same level with regard of having it completed. Yeah? There's mainly 1 work package 3, which is still in a preliminary stage, but there we already have quite interesting observations that we would like to share with you. Now I talked a lot about what we want, aims, assumptions, and so on. Of course, it's also important to be very clear about how we use our concepts or the notions, the terms that we use. And first of all, we talk about border, debordering, rebordering, interstices. And what does this mean? We have a social constructivist approach in our project, and that means that we conceive borders as a result of social but also material construction processes referred to the border lines. Border lines are the separating, let me say, practices between two countries. But we also look at the border regions. We have both in mind the border lines in a narrow sense and the border regions in a wider sense. There we look at the straddling of the borderline, and how it expands or shrinks together to a smaller place or space. We also are aware of the fact, theoretically, that when we talk about the social construction of reality, that social constructions of borders can differ between different social groups. There can be differences of how to understand the border or the other side of the border and the own side of the border. And we also see that constructing borders means that this is a process in time and that it is an ongoing and continuing change. Debordering means the elimination of previous borders. That means the physical barriers, of course, and the posts that were there. On the macro level, the meso and also the micro level, so there we differentiate between different levels. The micro levels are more the everyday levels of bordering, and the macro level would be the national one between Poland and Germany. And the meso is that of the concrete borderline issues on site. Rebordering means the re-establishing of previous borders, and maybe even the drawing of new borders at another place, maybe even more on the other side of maybe from the German perspective in the middle of Słubice. It could be that there is a new construction of border in the middle of Słubice for a German perspective. So this is what we took into consideration. And when it comes to interstices, we think that this is a practicing of deterritorialization because something unique is emerging now, which of course has to struggle with different national regulations on each side, but overcomes that a bit by very close collaborations. So this was our concept. And of course, this is embedded in a theoretical approach which uses different streams which are, in some cases, very closely connected. I already mentioned that we are social constructivists, relying on Berger and Luckmann. This is the main core of our approach, but we have elaborated this also with the more recent development in sociological theory, the communicative constructivism, looking much more than the social constructivism on material aspects, on practices, where materiality comes also into play, where we look not only at verbal signs or language, but also at material things, technologies, for example, traffic infrastructures and so on. This comes into play when we use communicative constructivism. And very, very much interlinked with communicative constructivism is the sociology of knowledge approach to discourse. It's part of it, meanwhile, where we have also an interest in verbal aspects, in how to speak about the border, how media, for example, present the borders on the borderlands. But there are also dispositives which use material aspects. That means it's also open for the material things. So these three parts are very closely interconnected, and each part adds a bit more than the others before. And I would also like to add that we rely on some assumptions of actor network theory because we have this interest in materiality and these aspects. And if we take this seriously, we should also consider the idea of Latour, who says objects too have agency. What do the material things with people? What do they trigger? Do the left or the border posts that are in decay, do they trigger still border feelings? What happens? So this is what we wanted to also look at, and this is why we take this also on our list of theoretical thinking. And last but not least, we are very interested in mobility approaches, because when we speak from cross-border practices, we have to look at these mobilities of people and want to understand in how far mobility is a major aspect of social life, also in the border regions, and how these mobility practices are located and materialized. This is the conceptual background, and from a theoretical point of view, and also from the methodological one, I would like to tell that the grounded theory approach is the comprehensive approach for our work. There we used the methodological tool of coding, which was very helpful for us, but we also use it as a tool to develop theoretical concepts out of the empirical data and to somehow prove this on the background of that what we have as a conceptual wider framework, to work with this and to see which assumptions are good or helpful and which others are not helpful. Well, I think that this is mainly the message that I wanted to tell, and I would also like to warn you that we cannot go into depth after the next in the next in the work package presentations. We cannot tell all our results. We made a selection. Please be aware of it. We made a selection, and hopefully this will trigger new questions, and we can come up with new other observations that we had. And as I already said, it's not yet, in most cases, final results, but already very consolidated results. In work package 3, it's very preliminary, but already interesting. And when it comes to the different regions, you will also see that we will not systematically dedicate our presentations of results to the wider axis Berlin-Poznan, to the smaller axis Frankfurt-Oder-Słubice, and to the rural area. We will also bring different results that address this, so that you can see how the picture emerges out of different results and how we addressed really each of our research questions of this very complex project. Thank you very much. So far from my side.